Oh, that was sort of abrupt. I probably should have done like a smooth transition. I was a DJ in college, and you think I would have learned better. Hello, and welcome to our lunchtime live stream. I'm Miriam, and this is Trials and Errors, a show where we try to demystify the workings of the justice system. So I thought I would spend just a few minutes today talking about what happened yesterday in the impeachment hearings. And basically the House managers, and they are the prosecutors in this case, in the impeachment case. And if you watch some of my other videos, you'll see I have two of them on how impeachment works. So if you haven't watched those, when this is done, you should set up some time to go ahead and watch those. But the House managers, Jamie Raskin, presented the arguments and a really powerful video of all of the events of January 6th. And then Trump's lawyers went ahead and, I guess, said a bunch of words. And the entirety of the argument was about, it wasn't about the actual events, the insurrection or the charges within the document or within the articles of impeachment. What it was about was whether or not it was even constitutional to hold this impeachment trial. And of course, Trump's argument is that it's not constitutional because he is no longer in office. And there were a couple of arguments that were entirely just disingenuous. I mean, maybe all of them from Trump's lawyers. The first of which, and maybe the most notable one of which, was that the House waited to deliver the articles of impeachment to the Senate. They waited 12 days. They waited after Trump was out of office or very close to it. And the reality of that is that the Senate adjourned on January 7th. So the day after they confirmed the electors, they approved the electors, the Senate adjourned. And people had asked, Democrats had asked McConnell, like, hey, let's not do this. Like, let's keep working. This major thing happened. And he said no. And they weren't scheduled to come back until January 19th anyway. So there was no way that they could have delivered those articles of impeachment to a Senate that wasn't even in session at the time. And, Jamie Raskin points out, is there a January exception? He had this great chart about, in the first year you can be impeached, in the second year you can be impeached, in the third year you can be impeached, but you can't be impeached in January of your final year because you can do anything. It's just a get out of jail free card, ultimately. And the argument that the Democrats or the House neglected and they waited on purpose just doesn't bear out when you look at the facts. But we know that facts don't really matter. What matters is how people feel about whatever is happening. So all they need to do is convince people that this is true, that, the House waited, and people will believe it. It's really that simple. The other argument, which I think is as disturbing, was one of extortion, basically. And Trump's lawyers said, if you impeach this president, that Republicans will be in power again. There will be a pendulum swing. And if you do that, then suburban voters in Pennsylvania suburban voters, will call their representatives, and their representatives will be forced to do the same thing. So it was basically, we are going to make sure that Trump's base, when the Republicans are back in power, Trump's base will insist that Democrats be impeached. And they talk about Eric Holder and the Fast and the Furious. And, if you watch my other videos about impeachment, you see that impeachment is akin to an indictment. And Trump was impeached while he was still in office. All of the things that happened they happened when he was in office. I mean, if you want to go ahead and try to impeach Eric Holder for Fast and Furious, I mean, have at it. Let's see how it plays out. So those were the two major takeaways that I had. If anybody, hi Secret Squirrel, thanks for joining. If anybody else had any takeaways, please put them in the chat box. I would love to hear your opinions about how you thought it played out yesterday. We know that it doesn't matter what we present. And at 1 o'clock today, there's supposed to be more video and more evidence that's going to be presented. C-SPAN 2 is the best place to go to watch all of this stuff, because they don't give you any commentary, right? It's just the Senate doing its thing. And I really like that, because then I can make a determination for myself as to what means what. And, the people on CNN and MSNBC, they may not always have our best interest at heart when they are actually discussing what's happening on the Senate floor. So I suggest you go to C-SPAN 2. You can actually set an alert if you have a C-SPAN login, like a C-SPAN account. I do. It's really great. And you can go in and do that. So unless somebody wants to talk more about impeachment, my position right now is that it's very important for democracy. I cannot underestimate the importance in making sure that the evidence at least is presented fully. Oh, one more thing. They talked about due process, right? And how he's denied due process, which makes no sense, right? He knows what's going on. He knows what he's charged with. He knows everything. And the last time he was impeached, they didn't want witnesses, right? They didn't want evidence. They didn't want testimony. In fact, again, if you watch my video, I have a clip from Lindsey Graham where he says, I'm not even trying to be a fair juror. I'm not interested in what happens here. So, but again, it doesn't matter what actually happened. What matters is what they can get people to believe. And they can get people to believe this. They can get people to believe that it's unfair that he only had, from January 6th until February 10th to prepare his defense. But you know what? The other thing I want to note is, Jon Stewart, your joke about public defenders was bad. It was crappy. Maybe people could have gotten away with that stuff a long time ago, way, way, way then, but not anymore. Okay. Do not mock our people. All right. Public defenders deserve the utmost respect. They are incredibly knowledgeable. I talked about them in my last live stream. Stop. Okay. So Trump has sucked the wind out of just about everything. He sucked the energy and the air out of America for so many years. And we have really not been able to celebrate things or concentrate on things as they come up and as we should. And again, it's really important that we make sure that we, hammer home why Trump should never be able to run for office again. Super important. But this is Black History Month, and I don't want Trumpaloo taking that away from us, right? I want to still go forward and pay attention to Black history and the people who have built this country, right? That may have been ignored, that we don't think about because we're so busy thinking about either ourselves, our families, COVID, whatever, and Trump. So I want to continue talking about Black History Month. I want to keep talking about race and the law. I want to keep talking about the inequity and inequality in our justice system. And I want to keep talking about people who, I have discovered this month, or who I've done a little bit more research on this month. And I want to share that with you. So if any of you have done that, if you're, if you watch any of these videos, you want to leave a comment down below about somebody that you read about or you learned about a little more deeply and you'd like to discuss during the rest of this month, I'd be thrilled to have you put that in the chat or in a comment. So I started reading about Ida B. Wells, and I didn't know that she was a co-founder of the NAACP. At some point later on, she was pushed out of leadership, but she was a co-founder of the NAACP. And I didn't know a lot about Ida B. Wells because, as a lot of these articles say, when you do start learning about her, that she really was an unsung hero. And I think part of it, if I'm kind of reading all of this correctly, is because she was fairly militant and outspoken about the things that she thought were wrong. She didn't mince her words. She wasn't nice about it. She didn't try to put flowery phrases in. And she really didn't try to make nice with white people. I mean, she was presenting a case specifically about lynching and the lynching of Black men charged with rape in America. And she really had to go underground and go into hiding and, kind of go from place to place because she dared to say that some white women had relationships with Black men because they wanted to. And that was really dangerous to say because having an intimate relationship with a Black man was a crime. So it was always easier for the white woman to say, well, I was raped. And we know, if we take a look at how we are seeing the world and things play out in America right now when it comes to white women, we know that white women, the majority of white women voted for Donald Trump, right? And that white women are protected, right, by the patriarchy, or so they believe. I mean, the patriarchy comes for them too, and it wasn't any different. It started then, right? So if you look at the South and you read some of these articles about why these men were being lynched, right, why they were being accused of rape, it was because of these women's honor, right? I mean, white men really had to protect the honor of Southern white women, and no one was going to believe that a white woman on purpose would have sex or have a relationship with a Black man. And Ida B. Wells dared to say that, which, I mean, it's true. So I have a bunch of things that I'd like to share about Ida B. Wells. Again, if anybody has any questions, you want to chime in and chat, please feel free to do so. I'm not an Ida B. Wells expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's super important that, if I can learn this in a few days, so can you. So I want to start with a little video from, I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to share my screen again and see if it works. Okay.
Ida B. Wells and her friends, they would have simply been able to go to the theater and sit wherever they wanted to sit, or to get on the train and sit in the first class car if you bought a first class ticket. And then things began to change in the late 1870s and the 1880s as you get this movement away from the 1875 Civil Rights Act, which was a sweeping civil rights act, federal civil rights act. Then you get the court beginning to take on these challenges where people are saying, well, no, that's not what the 14th Amendment means, that the 14th Amendment can still be interpreted in a way that allows me to determine who was going to sit where. Well, Ida B. Wells gets on the train and she's bought a ticket for the first class car. But then the conductor says, no, you've got to sit in the car that we have reserved for African-American passengers, which is a smoking car. And she refuses. And the conductor literally grabs her and pulls her out of the seat, and she is thrown off the train. So she takes it to court, and she actually wins in the Memphis courts, the circuit courts, they have to pay a fine, but then the railroad appeals. And when the railroad appeals to the Tennessee Supreme Court, they win on that level. It's an insult to her, but she's been taught a lesson that she didn't want to learn. And in learning that lesson, maybe it makes her even a little more militant.
So, that's what I think too. I think she was a militant person, and it didn't sit well because it was there's already a lot of anxiety and tension, and I guess people just wanted it all to be a little bit nicer. Maybe Black Americans still believed that asking nicely or being the best that they can be would convince white Americans to treat them with respect. And, trying to be like the good one or didn't work, right? She bought a first class ticket and they told her she couldn't sit there. So clearly she had the money for a first class ticket, and that didn't matter. So I found that to be incredibly interesting. And the other thing I found interesting about that was when we talk about the Civil Rights Act, right? When we talk about the Ku Klux Klan Act, right? And we talk about the sweeping civil rights reform that, and somehow at some point we get to Jim Crow, right? We get to separate but equal as it gets chipped away, as the 14th Amendment gets hacked away at, and what it means. So you have this time where, in the South, Black and white people are sitting in the same train car. And then that changes. So when we talk about things like Make America Great Again, there was never a time where it was great, because in the 1890s, maybe they could sit in the same car, but they couldn't vote. So, what is this time? Anyway, I'm digressing to Trump again, and I said I wasn't going to do that. So after that, there's a book that Ida B. Wells wrote. It's called Southern Horrors, and you can actually get it on the Gutenberg Press. It's free. It's a pamphlet. It's about 40 pages long, or you can get it on Amazon Kindle also for free. And that specifically talks about lynching in America, and Southern Horrors is about the lynching of Black men who are accused of rape. And it also briefly touches on how and why she had to kind of go underground and go into hiding. But so while I was doing that, I wanted to see, if you go to this, I'm going to share this with you too. If you go to, this is the Equal Justice Initiative. And if you go to the Equal Justice Initiative, oh, did I not share it? What did I not do? Oh, I didn't put it in here. When you go here, it tells you, it basically is by month, you can see, and by day, you can see what happened, basically what happened with respect to Black history on this month. But it's really about the atrocities that occurred to Black Americans throughout history. And so I looked about today, and there you go. Mob of 2,000 white people lynches a Black man in Brookhaven, Mississippi. And so that's what happened today. And I just thought it was sort of interesting that it was, I think Black people were lynched a lot, but that it came up when I was looking for Ida B. Wells and reading Southern Horrors, and that today in history, Eli Peugeot was lynched by a mob of more than 2,000 white people. He was accused of assaulting a white woman and was killed before he could be tried in a court of law. So I then went on and just sort of tried to look at lynchings in America. And, there's a lot, like we could look at a lot of stuff. There was a lot of lynchings. So there's you can just kind of pick and choose. which is very disturbing, obviously. But I saw articles, right? I mean, you hear about it. You hear about the articles that would be written up in local newspapers about lynching. But there's something, and this is an article in just, Vicksburg, Mississippi, Tuesday, February 9th. And this is about a man named Roby Baskin, who was accused of killing a preacher, a pastor. And they had threatened to lynch him. And so they wanted him to be moved so that he could get to safety. And they didn't move him. And if you look at this part right here where it says Negro confesses crime, circumstantial evidence alone had caused the Negro's arrest. Never once did he indicate that he knew any of the particulars of the crime, simply saying the watch was given him by another Negro whose name he could not disclose. Okay, then somebody tells them a story. It sounds right. So the sheriffs guarding the prisoner who determined to force him to confess. I mean, they put this in the paper. They were determined to force him to confess. Baskin was peering through the bars, his eyes dilated and his frame shaking with fright. Okay. This is the prisoner, okay? Peering through the bars, his eyes dilated and his frame shaking with fright. Several questions were rapidly put to him by the marshal, and all were answered in the negative. He didn't know. I don't know anything. I don't know anything. Suddenly, he perceived he was being led into a trap and refused to talk. He said, "Oh, no, you're trying to get me to confess to something I didn't do." So Mr. Pratt said, "All right, they are committing to lynch you. And if you don't know anything about the crime, I don't see why we should protect you," making a motion as if to leave the building with the guards. This final move had the desired effect, and Baskin beseeched them to remain, and he would tell all. The Negro was reassured by the promises of the deputies that they would do all in their power to protect him. And of course, that was a lie. So think about how I don't know if I shared that or not. Maybe I didn't. I think I did. How they forced a confession out of him, and proudly so. They told him that if he didn't have anything to do with the crime, that they shouldn't protect him from lynching. I mean, that makes no sense. If you're innocent, we don't need to protect you. And that's not what they said. They said, tell us what we want to hear, or else you're going to be lynched, and we're going to let them lynch you. So what else was he going to do? And at the end of the day, he was lynched anyway. And so, let me tell you what Ida B. Wells was doing at this point. She was traveling around the country documenting lynchings in America. And I think that she had documented about 700 lynchings in America. So all of this she would catalog. Here's an article in the New York Times about, I tried to find the entire, let me share this with you. The entire article, but I could not. There's a lot of steps to doing this. If you see, it says Negro murderer lynched, confessed slayer of minister, taken from the jail and hanged. Okay? And you can see it's right here in this part of the newspaper in the New York Times. And here's the amazing article, and it says, Roby Baskin, who confessed the murder of Reverend Hudson, was lynched by a mob here this afternoon. A crowd of over 300 determined citizens, patriots, took the Negro from the jail and hanged him to a nearby tree. Not a shot was fired, and the whole proceeding was conducted quietly. I don't have a lot of words for that. It's just not, I don't know what to say, right? The whole proceeding was conducted quietly. So he confessed. They let them come into the jail, take him out anyway. So, here we are 120 years later, and now, our lynchings are police shootings in addition to actual lynchings. So, there's a lot of work to do, folks. There's a lot of work. I'm going to show you just a couple of other things. I'm going to make this a short stream, shorter than normal. God, there's a lot of steps. Okay. Congress moves to make lynching a federal crime after 120 years of failure. So, murder is a crime, right? So there's not really a reason to make lynching a separate crime. But the fact that we refuse to do it, and murder is a crime federally in certain specific circumstances. So they want lynching to be a federal crime, even if it doesn't set into the other categories for how a murder becomes into federal jurisdiction. So they want all lynchings to be federal crimes. So it didn't happen. It just died. It's not. We don't have an anti-lynching law. But we should. And hopefully we will soon. 120 years. So I wanted to play just a tiny little clip of this.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by James K. White
and Laura Victoria.
Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All Its Phases by Ida B. Wells. The Malicious and Untruthful White Press. The Daily Commercial and Evening Scimitar of Memphis, Tennessee are owned by leading businessmen of that city. And yet, in spite of the fact that there had been no white women in Memphis outraged by an Afro-American, and that Memphis possessed a thrifty, law-abiding, property-owning class of Afro-Americans, the commercial of May 17, under the head of More Rapes, More Lynchings, gave utterance to the following.
The lynching of 3 Negro scoundrels reported in our dispatches from Anniston, Alabama, for a brutal outrage committed upon a white woman, will be a text for much comment on Southern barbarism by Northern newspapers, but we fancy it will hardly prove effective for campaign purposes among intelligent people. The frequency of these lynchings calls attention to the frequency of the crimes which causes lynching. The Southern barbarism, which deserves the serious attention of all people, North and South, is the barbarism which preys upon weak and defenseless women. Nothing but
weak and defenseless women. So they have to lynch men who are accused of rape of white women, right? Because they're defenseless. It's a tough book, right? It's a tough read, but it's important, I think. And she was really brave for writing it. Now, what's really cool, and not really cool, is the New York Times published an obituary of Ida B. Wells in 2018, I want to say, because they hated her. They called her all kinds of names because she dared to speak out. And in 2018, they had this whole series where, and remember, the New York Times is the one that had that article about, there was this lynching and it all went off without a hitch. But I don't know. They want credit for this, I guess. I guess they want credit for writing this. I don't know that we should give them credit. Here is the article, 1862 to 1931. It's called Overlooked, right? Overlooked. Thank you, New York Times. Thank you. It's a great article, though, because it does talk about her history, who she was. It's not that long, but it gives you a good, rundown of what happened, what she did, who her husband was. And here I had thought this later in life, Wells fell from prominence as she was replaced by activists like Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, who were more conservative in their tactics and thus had more support from the white and black establishments. So I wonder if it was not just because she was militant, but also because she was a she. That's what I think. I mean, she was militant and she was a she. They also say Wells was threatened physically and rhetorically constantly throughout her career. She was called a harlot and a courtesan for her frankness about interracial sex. And then I ran into this Guardian article that actually says that the New York Times once branded her as a slanderous and nasty-minded mulatress. But they didn't actually include that in there. I never posted that. That really sucks. I read all of it and I didn't show it to you. I'm sorry. Maybe I did. Let me know if I'm showing it to you. I have no idea because I can't see it. This whole program is making me insane. Plus my hair is backwards. Like I don't know which way I'm going. Like it's all crazy. So that's my story today, folks. Ida B. Wells, lynching, civil rights, the dissolution of whatever civil rights people had. Let me see. Remember, qualified immunity is also in direct contravention of the civil rights laws. So think about that. And I'm going to call it a day, folks, because I do want to watch the impeachment trial at 1 p.m. I have a little bit of work to do in between then. I don't want this to go on for too long. I know everyone's busy. I thank you for joining me today. I want to say hi to Leslie and Secret Squirrel for actually making some chats. I probably need to look at this cool mug I got. Capitalist. Isn't it cute? Look at this, so cute.